All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts. The trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. The Shit Test Playbook, Stoic Strategies for Rational Men in a Feminist Era, written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. The Civilization Scale Shit Test. Why apologizing to woke ideology is evolutionary suicide and stoic amused mastery is the only path through the feminist wasteland. I watched a man destroy himself in a boardroom last Tuesday. The facilitator, a woman with a sociology degree and a grudge, asked him to reflect on his privilege as part of a mandatory DEI inquisition. He apologized, he capitulated, he groveled. And I watched the contempt flash across every woman's face in that room. Biological contempt that no amount of feminist indoctrination can suppress. He failed the shit test, and in that moment of weakness, he ceased to exist as a sexual being. They will never respect him again. This is the central lie of our feminized age, that male submission to gynocentric framing earns respect. It earns nothing but disguised disgust. Let us speak etymological truth. The Latin testum means an earthen vessel, a crucible for proving metal through fire. A real test reveals character, separates gold from dross, the ver from the beta. What passes for testing in our decadent epoch is something fouler, a Kafka trap designed to extract confessions from the innocent and manufacture guilt from innocence itself. Robin DiAngelo's white fragility theory operates on precisely this switch trial logic. If you protest your innocence, your protest proves your guilt. If you remain silent, your silence proves your complicity. If you agree, your agreement proves your unconscious bias. It is self-sealing epistemological fraud, a logical cancer that metastasized through academia before infecting every corporate HR department and government bureaucracy in the Western world. Aristotle identified this fallacy 2 millennia ago, yet modern managers genuflect before it. You have been lied to about the nature of women. Schopenhauer knew this truth in 1851. Women are not evil, but they are different. And that difference includes a ruthless capacity for fitness testing that civilization once channeled toward noble ends through the institutions of marriage, male authority, and social accountability. Remove those constraints, replace them with feminist liberation and no-fault divorce, and you unleash hypergamy untethered, an evolutionary force that will consume your resources, extract your genetic contribution, and discard your simpering carcass when a higher status male presents himself. The statistics confirm what red pill theory predicts. 70% of divorces initiated by women. Family courts awarding custody to mothers in 82% of contested cases. Paternity fraud rates between 3 to 10% depending on jurisdiction. These are not accidents of an imperfect system. They are features of gynocentrism unbound. What follows in these pages is a weapon, a rhetorical longsword forged in the fires of Western rationalism, tempered in Aristotelian logic, and consecrated to the transcendental good, true and beautiful. I will teach you to see the shit test in its many manifestations. When she asks your opinion on immigration to measure your frame, when she suggests let's just be friends to extract resources without reciprocity, when she creates scheduling chaos to test whether you lead or apologize, Each test is an opportunity, not a threat, a crucible where stoic masculinity can prove itself against the chaos of feminized modernity. Master these principles and you will walk through the woke wasteland as a sovereign being, no longer prey to manipulation, no longer confused by contradictory demands, no longer sacrificing your dignity on the altar of female approval. The shit test metafrangrib, evolutionary biology meets cultural Marxism. A vice president at a Fortune 500 company sits in a mandatory diversity training seminar, the fluorescent lights humming overhead like a collective headache. The facilitator, a woman with angular glasses and a permanent scowl, asks the room, who here has benefited from privilege? One by one, the men raise their hands, apologetic, diminished, broken. Each admission is a submission, a public flagellation before the tribe. Then the facilitator turns to the one man who hasn't raised his hand, the new director of engineering, a man who built his career on competence rather than contrition. And you, she presses, her tone sharp with accusation. He leans back, smiles faintly and says, I benefited from a father who taught me discipline, a mother who told me I could achieve anything, and a country where merit still matters, though barely given seminars like this. The room gasps. HR opens a file. But something else happens. Every woman in that room, including the facilitator, later describes him in performance reviews as commanding, a natural leader, someone who doesn't crack under pressure. He passed. The corporate diversity seminar is not education. It is a macro-scale shit test, a fitness probe dressed in the language of justice, and the correct answer is never apology. Consider the immigration debate, that peculiar ritual where a man's moral worth is measured by his willingness to signal empathy for distant strangers over his own community's stability. A woman at a dinner party asks, but don't you feel compassion for refugees? The question seems innocent, humanitarian even. But watch her eyes as she asks it. They're scanning for weakness, for the man who will fold, who will abandon his territorial instincts to win her momentary approval. The man who answers with statistics about wage suppression, housing crises, and cultural friction is branded cold, unfeeling, a failure of the empathy test. The man who parrots the approved sentiment, refugees welcome, borders are racist, receives social validation but loses her respect. She will not date him, will not desire him, will not remember him. The third response is the correct one. I feel compassion for everyone, including my own children, whose futures I'm charged with protecting. Empathy without boundaries is suicide dressed as virtue. This answer signals strength, discernment, a capacity to hold complexity. The shit test is not about immigration. It is about whether you can maintain your frame when the entire culture conspires to collapse it. The cycle by which these tests propagate through civilization follows a ruthlessly efficient pattern: creation, enforcement, internalization, reproduction. A feminist academic creates a new boundary test: toxic masculinity, male privilege, fragile white male, and introduces it into the institutional bloodstream through peer-reviewed journals, conference proceedings, and carefully curated data sets. Enforcement follows via HR departments, university disciplinary boards, social media mobbings, and the ever-present threat of professional annihilation. Internalization occurs when men, desperate to avoid the lash, adopt the framing as truth and begin self-policing, self-accusing, self-hating. Reproduction completes the cycle. These broken men teach their sons to submit, their daughters to despise male weakness, and the next generation enters the world already captured. The cycle is a parasitic organism feeding on masculine vitality, and it can only be broken by men who refuse to internalize the premise, who see the test, name it, and decline to play. The word test descends from the Latin testum, an earthen vessel used in metallurgy to separate precious metal from dross through the application of intense heat. A test was a proving, a refining, a demonstration of character under pressure. The ancient understanding was noble. A man is tested so that he might emerge stronger, his virtues clarified by fire. The modern shit test inverts this logic entirely. It is not designed to strengthen men but to expose weakness, not to refine but to humiliate, not to build character, but to identify the submissive males who can be controlled and the defiant ones who must be destroyed. The HR seminar, the pronoun interrogation, the privilege walk. These are not tester refining gold, but weapons softening targets for exploitation. When you understand this etymological corruption, you understand everything about the feminist project. It takes the language of proving and perverts it into the practice of breaking. Gamma bias represents one of the most sophisticated cognitive manipulations in the feminist arsenal. The theory, developed by researchers Belinda Brown and Anna Deacon, describes a peculiar double band. Female preferences are framed as universal moral goods. Women prefer emotionally available partners becomes men should be more emotionally available. While male preferences are pathologized as toxic oppressions, men prefer younger women becomes pedophilic beauty standards damage female self-esteem. Notice the asymmetry. When women want something, society must bend to accommodate it. When men want something, men must be reprogrammed to stop wanting it. This is not equality, it is gynocentric totalitarianism wearing the mask of justice. And every man who has been shamed for his natural preferences while watching female preferences enshrined in corporate policy and family court precedent has felt its sting without possessing the vocabulary to name it. Cultural Marxism's great achievement was recognizing that female testing behavior could be weaponized at civilizational scale through institutional capture. The Frankfurt School theorists and their feminist successors understood that women are natural conformity enforcers, evolutionarily selected to maintain group cohesion by punishing deviation from established norms. This is not villainy, it is biology, a perfectly adaptive mechanism for keeping small hunter-gatherer bands unified. But when this instinct is hijacked by institutions, when the university trains women to identify deviation as oppression, when the HR department empowers them to punish microaggressions, when the therapy industry validates their every emotional fluctuation as evidence of systemic harm, the result is a civilization-scale enforcement mechanism that policies male behavior with the cold efficiency of an insect. Hive, the personal is political, they declared, and thus every woman's shit test became a weapon of state power. Every leftist accusation operates as psychological projection, a truth inverted and hurled at the enemy. When they call you fragile, observe who requires trigger warnings, safe spaces, and speech codes to survive encounters with disagreement. When they denounce toxicity, notice which ideology produces suicide epidemics among its adherents, which revolution devours its children, which philosophy requires constant purges of insufficient believers. When they condemn hate, attend to the venom dripping from their own descriptions of heterosexual men, white people, traditional families, Western civilization. The German philosopher Schopenhauer observed that the zealot's hatred always reveals what threatens him most. The feminist hatred of masculine strength reveals feminine insecurity. The leftist hatred of Western civilization reveals their inability to build anything comparable. The woke hatred of binary thinking reveals their terror of clear distinctions that might judge them wanting. The feminist doctrine of equity collapses under the weight of its own contradictions with mathematical certainty. Consider the syllogism. Premise A asserts that all observable gender differences are social constructs with no biological basis. Premise B asserts that women are inherently more empathetic, nurturing, and cooperative than men, qualities that make them superior leaders, policymakers, and moral arbiters. The conclusion is inescapable. Both premises cannot be true simultaneously. If gender differences are purely constructed, then female superior empathy is a fiction of patriarchal socialization, not a virtue to be celebrated. If female superior empathy is real and biological, then the entire premise of social constructionism is false, and other biological differences might also be real, including those the feminists are desperate to deny. Every time a feminist argues that women should lead because of their innate emotional intelligence, she surrenders the constructionist position. Every time she argues that constructionism proves women are identical to men in all relevant capacities, she surrenders the claim to superior empathy. The framework eats itself. Schopenhauer's infamous essay on women contained observations that have landed entire modern libraries of feminist refutation upon his reputation, yet his core insight remains devastatingly accurate. Female nature is not evil, but it operates according to different principles than male nature, and a civilization that removes the structures channeling those principles toward collective benefit will suffer the consequences. The great philosopher recognized that women's natural hypergamy, the drive to mate with the highest status male available, was perfectly sensible from an evolutionary perspective, but required social constraints to prevent social chaos. Monogamous marriage channeled hypergamy toward family formation and male productive output. Female liberation removed those constraints while maintaining the instinct, producing a civilization where a small percentage of men monopolize female attention, while the majority are expected to fund the system through taxation without receiving its benefits. The men who built the roads, defended the borders, and maintained the infrastructure are now told they are oppressive for expecting partnership in return. Evolutionary biology clarifies what feminist ideology obscures. The shit test is an immoral fitness probe, a mechanism by which female mammals assess resource acquisition capacity, protection capability, and genetic quality in potential mates. The lioness who swats at the male's face is not being cruel. She is verifying that he possesses the strength to defend the pride. The female deer who leads suitors on extended chases is not being capricious. She is ensuring that her offspring will inherit endurance. Human females are mammals operating under the same constraints, and their testing behaviors are not inventions of patriarchy or products of social conditioning, but expressions of natural law written into the species over millions of years. The problem is not the test itself, which is inevitable. The problem is a culture that has weaponized the test against male flourishing, that celebrates female right to probe while condemning male right to pass or decline. The frightened facilitator fleeing that room demonstrated something profound. The entire architecture of white fragility rests upon a paradox so brittle it disintegrates the instant it meets resistance. This theory is not scholarship, but a sophisticated trap, a linguistic snare designed to convert your instinct for self-defense into proof of guilt. It is the ultimate female primary shit test writ large across civilization. Just as a woman will unconsciously prod and provoke to test the strength of a potential mate's frame, the feminine primary social order has weaponized this evolutionary impulse into a pseudo-academic crucifix. Robin DiAngelo has resurrected the logic of the Salem witch trials and dressed it in progressive drag. If you confess, you are guilty. If you protest, you are guilty. If you question, you are doubly guilty. Like all leftist dogmas, it is sealed against falsifiability. White fragility theory, the ultimate gaslighting shit test. Truth is the hate speech of the century. This aphorism, circulating among thinking men, captures precisely why white fragility theory represents the most sophisticated psychological warfare ever deployed against rational consciousness. I watched a colleague last year, during a mandatory DEI session, respond to accusations of implicit bias with 4 words that collapsed the entire proceedings. Interesting theory. What evidence supports it? The facilitator stammered, flushed, accused him of proving her point through questioning, then abruptly ended the session when he calmly requested we define our terms before proceeding. She fled the room. The machinery of psychological manipulation cannot withstand even the gentlest tap of dialectical inquiry. The Museum of Fine Arts Boston incident demonstrates what awaits men who comply with these psychological operations. In 2020, the institution implemented racial equity sessions requiring employees to confess their complicity in systemic oppression through stand-alone statements. Those who maintained their dignity and refused were labeled problematic. Indeed, but they kept their self-respect and, interestingly, their positions. Those who complied, who groveled, who performed the required penance. Purged within 18 months. Compliance signals weakness, and weakness attracts predators. This is natural law, immutable across civilizations. Consider the etymology of fragility from the Latin fragilis, meaning brittle, easily broken. The irony achieves cosmic proportions. Leftist ideology, when subjected to empirical scrutiny, shatters like fine crystal dropped on marble. Request crime statistics disaggregated by demographic. Fragile? Mention the 13% responsible for 55% of homicides. Fragile. Note that affirmative action discriminates against white and Asian men using explicit racial criteria, pathologically fragile. The accusation of fragility functions as projection of the highest order, a psychological operation wherein the accuser attributes their own brittleness to their target. Formal logic exposes this fraud with surgical precision. Robin DiAngelo's theory operates as a self-sealing epistemological trap. If P, white person, expresses racism, then Q, white person, is racist. If not per, white person does not express racism, then still Q, white person, is racist because silence proves racism. If P challenge, white person, questions the theory, then Q intensified, white person's questioning proves fragility, which proves racism. This structure renders the theory non-falsifiable, the hallmark of religious dogma, not rational discourse. Karl Popper identified non-falsifiability as the dividing line between science and pseudoscience. White fragility theory fails this test catastrophically. It is theology masquerading as sociology, complete with original sin, whiteness, ritual purification, anti-racist work, and indulgences, donations to approved causes. The Salem witch trials operated on identical logic. The accused who confessed named others, demonstrating their corruption through complicity. The accused who denied demonstrated their guilt through denial. The accused who remained silent proved their guilt through silence. Cotton Mather would recognize DiAngelo's framework, instantly transposed from theological to racial discourse. The machinery of persecution remains unchanged. Western civilization developed the scientific method, due process, and the presumption of innocence specifically to protect individuals from this species of logical pathology. Our ancestors burned witches, we burn careers. The Homo sapiens remains constant, only the faggots differ. The statistical refutation of white fragility theory requires mere citation of publicly available government data. The FBI uniform crime reporting, Black Americans commit homicide at approximately 8 times the rate of white Americans, adjusted for population. Department of Health and Human Services. Black children represent 33% of foster care placements, despite comprising 15% of the child population. Bureau of Justice Statistics. Black men are 12 times more likely than white men to be incarcerated, but also commit violent crimes at rates correlating with incarceration disparities. These facts do not represent hatred. They represent data. That data itself has become hate speech proves the religious nature of the opposition. Crime, welfare consumption, illegitimacy rates, educational achievement gaps, empirical reality contradicts the systemic privilege narrative at every junction. If systemic racism explains all disparities, why do Nigerian immigrants outperform native-born white Americans in income and education? Why do Asian Americans dramatically outperform white Americans in virtually every socioeconomic metric? The theory cannot accommodate these inconvenient data points, so it ignores them, suppresses them, declares them hate facts. The term hate fact itself represents an Orwellian achievement, the labeling of truth as hatred because it contradicts a proved narrative. The Aristotelian virtue of thymus, spiritedness, righteous indignation, provides the philosophical remedy. Aristotle recognized that anger at false accusation represents virtue, not pathology. The man who feels nothing when slandered lacks proper thymus. He has succumbed to what Nietzsche would later identify as slave morality, the internalization of weakness as virtue. Western civilization celebrated the spirited defense of honor, the refusal to accept injustice, the willingness to stand against the mob. These are not fragilities, they are the bedrock attributes of free men. White fragility theory functions as societal scale shit test, that evolutionary mechanism whereby females test male fitness through provocation. The man who apologizes, who grovels, who accepts the frame of his own moral deficiency, demonstrates weakness. Evolutionarily, weakness attracts contempt, not respect. Women do not desire men who apologize for their existence. They despise such men. The same psychological mechanism operating at the interpersonal level now operates at civilizational scale. The men who pass this test, who reject the frame entirely, who respond with amused mastery, maintain dignity. The men who fail the test, who argue within the frame, who defend themselves, who plead their innocence, validate the frame, and guarantee further testing. The strategy of amused mastery beats defensive explanation every time. When accused of racism, respond, "I reject your frame entirely." Your theory is demonstrably false, psychologically manipulative, and beneath serious engagement. When pressed, define your terms, present your evidence, explain your methodology. When they inevitably cannot, then we have nothing further to discuss. This approach works because it refuses the psychological operation's fundamental premise that you must prove your innocence against an undefined charge using undefined criteria determined by your accuser. Western civilization's greatest institutions, the scientific method, due process, dialectical reasoning, the trivium evolved precisely to protect truth from manipulation. The Frankfurt School and its critical theory descendants understood that destroying Western civilization required first destroying confidence in these institutions. White fragility theory represents the culmination of this project, a weaponized epistemology that uses Western compassion against itself, that transforms the Christian impulse toward charity into self-destruction, that converts reasonable disagreement into evidence of guilt. The remedy is not more apology, more groveling, more penance. The remedy is thymus, the spirited refusal to submit to demonstrable lies. The masculine response to psychological manipulation is not defense, but attack. Not apology, but demand for evidence. Not compliance with corrupt frames, but destruction of those frames through superior logic. Every man who refuses to apologize for his existence strikes a blow for civilization. Every man who demands evidence before accepting guilt honors his ancestors. Every man who responds to manipulation with amused mastery demonstrates that the spell can be broken. The truth requires no defense, only the courage to speak it. I watched this academic dementia consume a young philosopher at a Midwest conference, where he declared with trembling certainty that all categories are social constructs, the catechism of every half-educated revolutionary who has skimmed one Foucault essay and concluded that reality itself is negotiable. When I asked whether the category social construct was itself a social construct, he blinked thrice before sputtering that perhaps some categories were more constructed than others, a qualification that obliterated his entire thesis in real time. The Aristotelian principle of non-contradiction does not negotiate with such creatures. It simply exposes their incoherence. But the schizoanalytic project cares nothing for coherence. It seeks precisely this dissolution of meaning, and it has metastasized far beyond the faculty lounge. Schizoanalysis and the desiring machines of feminist destructuration. The schizo in schizoanalysis is not a diagnosis to be cured, but a program to be implemented, a design for the systematic disassembly of the logos that holds Western civilization together. Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari, the twin prophets of this academic dementia, did not write a medical textbook in their Anti-Oedipus. They wrote a manual for civilizational suicide, a manifesto for the dissolution of every boundary, hierarchy, and natural distinction that allows a sane man to navigate reality. Their much vaunted desiring machines are nothing more than the weaponized appetites of the id, stripped of the superego's discipline and unleashed to consume everything sacred. The feminist project, ever opportunistic in its parasitism, seized upon this schizo archetype as its patron saint. What is the modern assault on fatherhood, marriage? And male spaces, if not the celebration of dissolution itself. To the schizoanalyst, the family is a prison, the father a tyrant, and the sexual distinction a crime against the flow of desire. This is not philosophy. It is the howling of demons dressed in academic robes. I watched this self-refutation unfold with hilarious exactness at a philosophy conference in the Netherlands, where a presenter with the nervous effect of a man perpetually checking his privilege declared that all categories are social constructs, all truth claims are violence, and all boundaries are oppression. When I raised my hand and asked him whether his own theory was true or merely another social construct, the silence that followed was more eloquent than his entire presentation. If all categories are constructs, then so is the category construct. If all truth claims are violence, then his claim that all truth claims are violence is itself an act of violence, the very oppression he purported to condemn. The man stammered, cited power dynamics, accused me of logocentrism as if logic were a disease, and ultimately admitted that truth was a concept he found problematic. Here is the eternal self-contradiction of the leftist. He asserts as true the proposition that nothing is true, fights for the right of all rights to be abolished, and constructs elaborate theories to prove that all theories are tools of oppression. You cannot reason with a man who has sawed off the branch he sits on, but you can surely enjoy watching him fall. The modern university has transformed into a schizoanalytic laboratory where meaning itself is the experimental subject, and the results are always the same: death. Consider the pronoun ritual, that daily liturgy of the insane where biological reality is suspended by linguistic fiat. A young woman, a biology major, no less informs her classmates that her pronouns are they, them, and expects the world to reorganize itself around this declaration. But pronouns are by definition distinctions of person, not expressions of inner identity. First person for the speaker, second for the addressed, third for the spoken of. To demand that others suspend grammar itself to accommodate one's desiring production is not liberation. It is the tyranny of the narcissist who cannot bear the existence of any structure he did not create. When you deconstruct categories to the point where man and woman lose all meaning, you have not freed humanity from oppression. You have freed reality from comprehensibility. The inclusive language commissars are not expanding the circle of belonging. They are dismantling the very faculty of recognition that makes belonging possible. Let us apply this schizoanalytic framework to the practical domain of mating, where the desiring machines of feminist destructuration grind young men into dust daily. Consider the friend zone, the dreary purgatory where promising young males are shelved like broken appliances while the objects of their affection pursue bad boys and thugs with predictable enthusiasm. The woman's declaration, "Let's just be friends," is pure schizoanalytic production. She extracts resources, emotional support, financial assistance, temporal investment, validation flows, while returning nothing but connection and shared experiences. The desiring machine runs one way. Her desires are produced and satisfied at his expense, while his desires are pathologized as entitlement and nice guy syndrome. What is the friend zone if not the economic model of socialism applied to relationships? The man invests capital, time, money, attention, and receives in return the same empty promises that socialist economies deliver to their citizens, from each according to his ability, to each according to her whims. The feminist Schizo Alliance has perfected a system where men are compelled to produce while being denied the fruits of their production. Deleuze and Guattari's anti-Oedipus exposed itself as the philosophical arm of cultural disintegration the moment it declared war on the arborescent model of organization. That is, any structure with roots, trunk, and branches, any hierarchy of cause and effect, any genealogy of meaning. They championed instead the rhizome, a horizontal network with no center, no origin, no point of reference, no truth. This sounds liberating to the adolescent mind until you realize that every healthy organism operates on arborescent principles. The human body has a head and limbs, a heart and periphery, a central nervous system and extremities. The family has parents and children, a structure of authority and transmission. The polis has governors and governed, law and citizen. To declare war on the arborescent is to declare war on life itself, on the very principle of organization that distinguishes the living from the dead. The rhizome they celebrate is not freedom. It is cancer, a proliferation of cells without purpose, consuming the host in mindless expansion. Here we must deploy the cold steel of syllogism against this warm fog of deception. Premise A healthy civilization requires boundaries, hierarchies, and differentiation distinctions between true and false, good and evil, man and woman, citizen and foreigner, order and chaos. Premise B, schizoanalysis, explicitly aims to dissolve all boundaries into flows of desire, to flatten all hierarchies into horizontal networks, to deconstruct all differentiations into an undifferentiated slurry of becoming. Conclusion: schizoanalysis is civilizational poison, and its practitioners are either fools who do not understand what they destroy or enemies who understand perfectly well there is no third option. You cannot partially abolish boundaries. You cannot somewhat flatten hierarchies. You cannot selectively deconstruct categories. Once the principle is admitted, the logic runs to its conclusion, and that conclusion is the ruins of Europe, the feral streets of Baltimore, the Kafkaesque family courts where fathers are stripped of children on the word of a lying harpy, the universities where truth is colonial and biology is cisnormative. When faced with schizoanalytic nonsense in the wild, in the workplace, the university, the dating market, the political discourse, your weapon is the oldest technology of Western civilization, the trivium. Grammar first. Demand definitions. What do you mean by gender? What do you mean by oppression? What do you mean by patriarchy? Force them to ground their terms in reality, rather than allowing them to deploy words as emotional bludgeons. Logic second, expose contradictions. If gender is a social construct, how can someone be born in the wrong body? If all hierarchies are oppressive, why should we accept the hierarchy of the oppressed over the oppressor? If truth is a tool of power, why should your truth claims have any power over me? Watch the schizoanalytic edifice collapse when deprived of its native element, the fog of undefined terms and undischarged assumptions. Rhetoric third, drive the dagger home with the confidence of a man who knows he has right on his side. Mockery is the proper response to the absurd. The comical deserves comedy. The schizoanalytic project celebrates as liberation what every previous civilization recognized as decay. Rome did not fall because its citizens were insufficiently fluid in their identities. It fell because boundaries dissolved, hierarchies flattened, and the distinction between Roman and barbarian lost all meaning. The barbarians did not need to defeat Rome. They merely needed to wait for Rome to dissolve itself through the very processes the schizoanalysts celebrate. And what remedy does the Western canon offer for this cancer? Precisely what it has always offered: the transcendental pursuit of the good, the true, and the beautiful. The natural law written on the human heart, the virtues of courage, justice, temperance, and prudence. The trivium that trains the mind to name, to reason, to persuade. These are not social constructs or phalangocentric oppression. They are the structural necessities of any civilization that wishes to endure. The schizoanalyst dissolves. The man of the West builds. The schizoanalyst flows. The man of the West stands firm. The choice between them is the choice between the ruins of Carthage and the eternal city. A choice that history will make for you if you refuse to make it yourself. The degradation of meaning we witness in the schizo-dissolution of categories is not confined to the academy. It oozes into the marketplace of intimacy, where women, consciously or unconsciously, wield the same deconstructive blade against male competence. The feminist schizo project destroys the logos of civilization. The shit test destroys the logos of the individual man. Having dismantled the arborescent hierarchy of truth, the modern wasteland presents the rational male with our isomatic trap. The friend zone, a lateral network of extraction, where the masculine virtue of provision is severed from the masculine reward of reproduction. This is the practical application of cultural Marxism at the cellular level, the redistribution of your time and resources to her emotional comfort, without the oppressive structure of commitment or return. To pass this test, you must reject the false premise of the deconstruction entirely. You must reassert the center. You must recognize that when she offers you the friendship of a castrati, she is not extending a hand in solidarity, but demanding your participation in the schizoanalytic destruction of your own lineage. The boundary is the only antidote to the poison of boundlessness. The syllogism is absolute. The friend zone is a relation of exploitation. The rational man rejects exploitation. Therefore, the rational man rejects the friend zone. The practical praxis, passing shit tests in the feminist wasteland. The cuckoldry of the modern male begins with 3 syllables. Let's just be friends. This phrase is not an invitation to platonic companionship. It is a coronation of your humiliation. When a woman speaks these words, she has already decided that your genetic line ends with her, a Darwinian dead end masquerading as mercy. The man who accepts this arrangement, who lingers in the antechamber of her affection, hoping that dutiful servitude will eventually yield romantic reward, has failed the most ancient fitness test encoded in human nature. He has demonstrated that his time has no value, his dignity no price, his seed no consequence. Nature abhors a sucker. The correct response to friend zoning is immediate withdrawal, a total freeze out that communicates without bitterness or negotiation that your attention is a commodity she has declined to purchase. I have enough friends will suffice, followed by radio silence. This is not cruelty, it is consequence. The friend-zoned man who remains available has taught her that his devotion requires no reciprocity, and she will can never respect him again. Consider the political shit test, now ubiquitous in our feminized dating discourse. A woman asks, "You don't care about immigrants?" With that characteristic blend of moral preening and predatory evaluation. She is not seeking information. She is probing for weakness, testing whether you will abandon truth to purchase her approval. The beta male equivocates, "Well, I think we should be compassionate, but also follow the law." He has failed. He has signaled that her feelings outrank his convictions. The red-pilled man responds differently. "I care about truth. Without borders, there is no nation. Without nation, there is no civilization. Without civilization, immigrants have nowhere worth immigrating to." Watch her eyes. The contempt evaporates, replaced by something far more useful. Respect. You have demonstrated that your frame cannot be guilted into submission, that you possess the masculine virtue of holding fast to reality against the emotional storms of gynocentric manipulation. The scheduling shit test operates through identical machinery. She creates drama around plans, hesitates, suggests alternatives, invents obstacles, not because she lacks interest, but precisely because she needs to verify that your time is valuable and your boundaries are real. The man who over-explains, apologizes, accommodates every fluctuation of her menstrual mood ring has announced himself a resource to be exploited. Last autumn, I watched a nephew of mine handle this perfectly. She texted, "I don't know if Saturday works, maybe Sunday. My friend might need me. Things are crazy right now." He replied, "I'm hiking Saturday. Join me or I'll see you next week." No negotiation, no butthurt, no desperate availability. She hiked. Of course she did. Women do not respect men they can command. Feminism understands something that most men have forgotten. Male-only spaces are the foundries of masculine strength. This is precisely why they attack them with such hysterical fervor. The lodge, the boxing gym, the poker night, the hunting camp, these are the civil society associations where men develop excellence without feminine supervision, where the apprenticeship mastery ladder can be ascended through merit rather than compliance. A man subjected to constant shit testing requires a sanctuary where his frame can recover, where he can speak truth without female audit, where the virtues of courage and honor and competition can be cultivated without the pervasive toxin of gynocentric judgment. Every time a male space is integrated in the name of equality, masculine competence declines. This is not coincidence. It is the intended consequence of a movement that recognizes male solidarity as the primary threat to female primacy. The principle of subsidiarity, that brilliant doctrine of Catholic social teaching which holds that matters should be handled by the smallest competent authority, applies with particular force to the dating realm. Your individual judgment, your preferences, your boundaries, your assessment of reality. These should not be subordinated to her feelings, her social media consensus. The gynocentric culture that insists male desire is inherently suspicious while female emotion is sacrosanct. When a shit test arrives, it is always an attempt to transfer authority from your competent judgment to her momentary whims. Resist. The man who asks permission has already surrendered the territory worth defending. Epictetus understood the stakes 17 centuries before the red pill. Some things are in our power, others are not. In our power are opinion, impulse, desire, aversion. In a word, whatever is our own doing. Not in our power are our body, our property, reputation, office. In a word, whatever is not our own doing. Her approval is not in your power. Her attraction is not in your power. The shit test is an examination of whether you have internalized this fundamental truth, whether you seek validation from without or possess the unshakable foundation of an internal locus of control. The feminist wasteland produces men who are entirely external. who desperately parse women's moods for clues about their own worth. These men fail every test because they have already conceded that female opinion is the currency of male value. The Stoic remastery begins when you stop caring about the outcome and start caring about the correctness of your response. There are 3 and only 3 valid responses to a shit test. First, amused mastery, the agree and amplify technique that demonstrates you cannot be provoked because her opinion simply does not register as a threat. She says, "You are so arrogant," and you reply, "Takes one to know one, sweetheart," with a grin. Second, frame control, the ignoring or reframing that signals her attempt at manipulation is beneath your notice. She says, "I bet you say that to all the girls," and you say, "Only the pretty ones." You have accepted the frame and returned it gift-wrapped. Third, withdrawal of attention. The nuclear option that reminds her your presence is contingent upon her respect. She crosses a line, you withdraw, conversation ended, date concluded, attention evacuated. What you never, ever do is offer earnest explanation or apology. This is the beta male tell. The confession that her feelings constitute a court of competent jurisdiction over your soul. The mixed constitution, that genius synthesis of monarchic authority, aristocratic excellence, and democratic accountability that produced the West's most stable polities, provides the template for healthy romantic relationships. Masculine leadership supplies the monarchic element, direction, decision, the final word on matters of consequence. Mutual excellence supplies the aristocratic element, the shared pursuit of virtue, the refinement of character, the civilizing influence of elevated standards. And mutual respect supplies the democratic element, the acknowledgement that both parties possess dignity, that consent matters, that tyranny breeds revolt. Feminism destroys this organic balance by demanding pure democracy, which in practice means her feelings rule without limit. Her preferences constitute the only legitimate authority, her complaints demand immediate redress. A relationship without masculine leadership is not a partnership, it is a gynocentric, and gynocentric produces the same result in relationships that it produces in civilization: entropy, resentment, and eventual collapse. Look at the world your grandfathers built, and then look at the wreckage gynocentrism has made of it. The statistical reality is a suicide rate for men that has skyrocketed as fathers are stripped from homes by family courts enforcing the tender years doctrine in all but name, while the "my body, my choice" mantra conceals the grim reality of millions of abortions, a practice so depraved it makes the sacrifices of Moloch look like petty vandalism. You have been told that toxic masculinity is the problem, yet you see that every civilization that has embraced the feminine imperative, open borders, empathy over truth, the friend zone resource extraction racket, and the deconstruction of natural law has collapsed into chaos. The schizoanalytic desiring machines of Deleuze and the gaslighting white fragility of D'Angelo are not academic theories. They are spiritual and psychological bioweapons designed to dismantle the mixed constitution of your mind, replacing your logos with their pathos. And they have been ruthlessly deployed to cuckold your reason and betray your interests. You have now gazed into the testum, the earthen vessel, and seen it for what it is, a forge of your own making. You understand that the equity syllogism refutes itself, that the empathy shit test is a loyalty oath to a lie, and that the entire apparatus of cultural Marxism is a grandiose fitness test for Western civilization. The next time a woman asks about your commitment to diversity, or a corporate commissar demands you confess your privilege, or a date tries to friend zone you, you will not apologize, you will not explain. You will stand as a rational man, armed with the trivium and shielded by Themos, the righteous spirit of the West. You have broken the spell. The gamma bias, the Kafka trap, the evolutionary ideological weapon, it all lies shattered at your feet. Go forth, build civil society, master your craft, and never again kneel before the false idols of the feminist wasteland. And now the sponsored book introduction, The Shit Test Playbook. Stoic strategies for rational men in a feminist era. Let's get one thing straight. This book isn't for everyone. If you're the kind of person who thinks men and women are interchangeable, or that gender roles are a social construct, put this down now. Go read something else. Maybe take up knitting. This book is for men who are tired of being told to shut up, sit down, and apologize for existing. It's for men who have had enough of walking on eggshells, dodging emotional landmines, and being treated like disposable utilities in a system that's rigged against them. If that's not you, close this book and walk away. You won't like what I have to say. I didn't write this book because I enjoy stirring the pot. I wrote it because I've lived it. I've been on the receiving end of every emotional weapon in the female arsenal. Double binds, word salad, gaslighting, dredged up grievances, character attacks, you name it. I've been through the ringer of modern relationships, where men are expected to be both stoic providers and emotionally vulnerable punching bags. I've seen firsthand how the system is designed to keep men trapped, laboring on the plantation while women are pedestalized, only for no one to end up happy. I've watched men I care about get destroyed by divorce courts, false accusations, and the endless demands of women who can never be satisfied. And I've had enough. This book is a survival guide for men in a world that's gone mad. It's not about hating women, it's about understanding them. Women aren't evil, but they are irrational. They operate on a different emotional frequency, and if you don't understand how they think, you're doomed to fail. This book will teach you how to decode their behavior, diffuse their emotional terrorism, and reclaim your power. You'll learn how to spot the hidden patterns behind their mate testing, how to remain unshaken in the face of their verbal weapons, and how to set boundaries without falling into the trap of toxic masculinity. You'll gain the mental toughness to handle their irrational demands and the tools to thrive in a gynocentric society without losing your integrity. But let me be clear, this isn't a book for the faint of heart. If you're looking for a pat on the back and a warm, fuzzy feeling, you're in the wrong place. This book is for men who are ready to face the hard truths, roll up their sleeves, and do the work. It's for men who want to stop negotiating with emotional terrorism and start living on their own terms. If that's you, keep reading. If not, close this book and walk away. You've been warned. The Shit Test Playbook, Stoic Strategies for Rational Men in a Feminist Era. Written by Conrad Riker. Buy now. Links in description